Hi. So there's something I've wanted to talk about for a long time, and I've just kept putting it off, which is kind of funny. I'll get to that. As some of you might know, or probably know if you follow me on social media, is that I'm in an intensive therapy treatment program right now. And a part of that is meeting with a psychiatrist and reviewing your whole history, your whole mental health history, medications, experiences, family, kind of everything. And they can give you a diagnosis or confirm the one you already have and talk about medications with you. So that was a process I did pretty early on. So maybe mid-January, I started that process of speaking with my psychiatrist. I've had a few different psychiatrists throughout my life, some definitely better than others, and before this, I've brought up some symptoms or concerns to psychiatrists that I have a really hard time focusing, I can't concentrate, just some things like that. And a lot of the time I was told oh, that's just a part of your anxiety. It's just anxiety that's stopping you from being able to focus. That's it. I was like, okay, great. That's sucky, but whatever. And then I went and saw this psychiatrist for the first time, and she said I might have ADHD, which was kind of mind-blowing because I've just been so dismissed by other doctors for so long and just told, oh, it's just your anxiety, that for someone to actually think I might have it and I could get medications to help control it, it's pretty massive. And she wanted me to go through some formal testing, which I also really respect because you don't just want to throw meds on everything that you may feel. It's good to go get formally tested, see if that is the problem, if ADHD does align with my symptoms, or if the diagnosis of ADHD actually fits. So I was on the wait list for a really long time. How many months? Months and months and months, and haven't heard anything back yet, which is really frustrating when you're even more self-aware about how much you can't focus and how it might be more than just anxiety. And so my psychiatrist finally said, you know what, let's start you on meds. I don't know if that's because she could see my behaviors, or she just saw how distressing it was that I wasn't able to focus. So I'm very thankful that she was willing to work with me on that and kind of bypass that formal testing and instead just try these meds, see what's happening, start really low, be really careful. And I see her every single day, so it's not like she's just throwing meds on me and I don't see her for a month, 3 months. I see her every single day, so I can update her on how it's going. She can check in on me. But yeah, I want to back up just a little bit and talk about kind of the diagnosis from her in the beginning. So the first thing she said is, okay, I think you might have ADHD, along with a few other diagnoses, which I will talk about separately and a different time. This is just ADHD today. And so she gave me a little symptom checklist and said, okay, bring this home, fill it out, bring it back, and we'll take a look. And I didn't really know much about ADHD. I just thought, okay, you can't focus. Typically you think okay, someone has a hard time sitting still, paying attention. I have this checklist here, and I just want to share it with you. And before that, this is not a diagnosis. This checklist just says if you have a certain number of checks that you checked off, then you might qualify to be tested. So please do not diagnose yourself. But if any of this sounds If any of this sounds like something that you can relate with, I would really recommend speaking with a doctor or a psychiatrist, and don't just handle this yourself because it can be finicky. So I went through this checklist and my mind was blown at all these things that are actually ADHD that I didn't know. So how many items? We have 18 items. Bear with me, please. Number 1. How often do you have trouble wrapping up the final details of a project once the challenging parts have been done? And then you select like never, rarely, sometimes, always. So wrapping up the final details of a project. That one's hard for me because I'm trying to think of an example, like school project. So maybe, I think that was like sometimes for me. How often do you have difficulty getting things in order when you have to do a task that requires organization? Yep, that suits me. How often do you have problems remembering appointments or obligations? That's interesting because I thought, well, I never forget appointments ever, but I also write every single thing down in my calendar. If I didn't have that calendar or my phone calendar, I would miss them all. And that's something to look at because that means I'm, compensating for how difficult it is for me to remember those obligations. And therefore I developed a skill or something to manage it. So that's interesting. 4, when you have a task that requires a lot of thought, how often do you avoid or delay getting started? I even delayed making this video because I was like, I don't know what to say, blah, blah, blah. Everything in my life is delayed or procrastinated. 5, how often do you fidget or squirm with your hands or feet when you have to sit down for a long time? I play with my nails. I don't have them right now because Corona, but I would always play with my fake nails, play with my fingers. And so for me, I don't know if that's like a fidget or if that's like a coping mechanism for me. We'll talk about that another time. Okay, 6, how often do you feel overly active and compelled to do things, like you were driven by a motor? That one for me is a big fat 0. I relate more to the inattentive side of ADHD instead of the hyperactive side. And from my knowledge, there's like the inattentive, the hyperactive, or like the combination of the two. And I'm more on the inattentive side. Okay, number 7. How often do you make careless mistakes when you have to work on a boring or difficult project? This one doesn't really fit me. I'm a perfectionist to a fault. Oh, it's hard to talk about one diagnosis without talking about my other diagnoses. But I don't want to. I don't want to get into it. I want to do them all separately because I feel like it's too much. But no, I have other coping mechanisms of like perfectionism that make up for me making careless mistakes. So I don't do that. 8, how often do you have difficulty keeping your attention when you are doing boring or repetitive work? All the time. Let me think back to elementary, middle school, high school. Could never focus. I closed it. Okay, here we go. We're good. 9, how often do you have difficulty concentrating on what people say to you, even when they are speaking directly to you? Yeah, I didn't know that was something that other people didn't experience. Someone could be looking me in my face and I will think about one part that they said and I'll like trail off and like, la 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 la. And they'll keep talking and they'll come back. I'm like, oh my God, I do not know what they just said. So just smile and nod. Haha, yeah, cool. Haha, really? Wow. Number 10, how often do you misplace or have difficulty finding things at home or work? And so this one, again, I just compensate. So for me, I have one purse and my mom was always like, oh, why don't you get like another purse and you can switch it up sometimes. And I never could and I didn't really understand why. But for me, I have one purse that has my one wallet and my one whatever, and it stays in one spot because my biggest fear is if I move things, they're gone forever. So I do not lose things because I don't let them be lost. My keys are on a long lanyard that stays in one spot by my front door. And so it's things like that that's really interesting, noticing these behaviors that I do that are obviously compensating for something else. What number was that? That was 10. So now let's do 11. How often are you distracted by activity or noise around you? I think this one's really common for a lot of people, but for me, it's not as much. I think that I'm so distracted by my own thoughts that I kind of zone out the world around me. Number 12, how often do you leave your seat in meetings or other situations in which you're expected to remain seated? No, if I have to sit in a lecture hall or sit at a dinner, I can do that. I mean, if I have the choice, I'd like to move my body a little bit or change positions in the way I'm sitting, but I can sit. 13, how often do you feel restless or fidgety? I feel restless kind of all the time. Fidgety, that's the thing, I don't know if what I do is fidgety or if it's me trying to cope with my anxiety, or am I coping with my anxiety by fidgeting? Oh, questions. Was it restless? But yeah, I feel restless all the time. Even if I'm just watching Netflix, I always have this feeling of okay, we gotta go do something. What are we doing? What's next? There's always something going on. 14, how often do you have difficulty unwinding and relaxing when you have time to yourself? So I think that's part of when I said restless for 13. I have a really tough time unwinding and relaxing. For me, it's practically impossible. I could be laying on a beach in Hawaii and still have thoughts just racing in my head and this uncomfortable feeling that something has to be done. It sucks. 15, how often do you find yourself talking too much when you are in social situations? Ha, I feel called out. I didn't know that was a thing. I mean, when I get nervous, I talk a lot. And as I've been doing some self-reflection, I also talk a lot because I'm so afraid of forgetting what I'm gonna say. I have something in my head and I'm like, oh, I need to say it right now and I need to say all of it and you have to listen because if I wait for 3 seconds, it's gone. I think this relates to another one. See, 16, when you're in a conversation, how often do you find yourself finishing the sentences of the people you are talking to before they can finish them themselves? I thought I was just impatient, and let's say sometimes a family member, they're talking and I know what they're gonna say, but they're and I just I know it, let's move on, let's say the word and let's go. So I definitely do that, and I'm trying really hard to kind of step back of that. And now I notice when other people finish each other's sentences and I just want to be whoa, it's okay. Let them get there. There's no rush. 17, how often do you have difficulty waiting your turn in situations when turn taking is required? See, this impatience thing, it's what's just a personal quality and what's something that's kind of out of your control. I mean, maybe a personal quality is out of your control, but impatience versus attention deficit. It's really interesting, and I'd love to talk about that more. If anyone has any opinions on that. What was that? I don't even remember what one I just read. Waiting your turn. Yeah, I think it's that restlessness. I'm okay, I have to do it. Let's go do it. Let's get it done. And so that it's that eagerness, or I'm not calm until I'm there. I'm thinking boarding an airplane. In Italy, everyone is just crowded around the gate. I don't know why. I want to diagnose the whole country with ADHD, but that is not my job. That's a cultural thing. Maybe that's why I also thought a lot of these things were normal, because I'm Italian and, I talk a lot and I'm impatient and yada, yada, yada. But I'm learning it's more than just being Italian. So anyways, the airport thing, they're crowded around and I feel very anxious. I'm okay, I need to get on there. And I'm not calm until I'm on the plane. I don't know if that's a turn-taking problem. And the last one, number 18, how often do you interrupt others when they are busy? I think that brings us back to the one about talking too much in social situations. Like, I think I'm gonna forget what I'm gonna say, so I need to say it right now. Otherwise, it's gonna disappear, and that's gonna be so frustrating to me that I just need to say it. I need to get it out there. I think that could also tie in with finishing sentences instead of waiting and letting someone finish, like interrupting by just, oh yeah, you did this, end of story. So that's the checklist. I don't want to give you more criteria on like, oh, how many do you need in order to have ADHD? Because I think self-diagnoses, I don't want to say they're harmful, but it makes me more anxious. Let's say if I seem like, oh, I definitely have ADHD and I need to go get help and I need this and why is no one helping me? I just feel like it makes me more impatient to trust the process of waiting to get tested, waiting to get medications, and then you don't just go on the highest dose. You have to start really slow and wait a couple weeks, go up a little bit, wait a couple weeks. So for me, I'm on a medication now for ADHD. I will not reveal what kind, because something I'm learning is that everyone responds differently to medications. So a medication that maybe I've tried in the past that didn't work for me will work really well for someone else. So I don't want to say, oh, this one didn't work for me, so then someone else is afraid to try it, because we're all so different. So right now I'm on a ADHD medication, and I'm only about 2, maybe 3 weeks into it, so it still feels early for me to understand how things are going. I think I'm able to focus more. It feels like I'm able to complete small tasks a little bit better. Even just like doing a load of laundry, I feel like I have less anxiety about going to do a task. It feels just a little more natural to complete a task instead of having to really pump myself up and put so much energy into it to get myself to do it. I also feel that my head feels a little quieter, which is really interesting. Like, I just feel different. And I was trying to name that. I was like, what is this? What is this feeling? And I was thinking, I think it just feels quiet. Where typically my thoughts are just rushing through my head. I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. Oh, and don't forget about that other thing. And then I have to do this today. And it just feels like, yeah, it just feels a little bit muted. And I'm still on a relatively low dosage. So we're gonna take this slow for a couple weeks and see how it goes, how I'm feeling. Like, do I feel like I'm not getting enough? Like, when I go back to school, will I be able to read a textbook finally? Or do I need to like inch it up just a little bit more in order to be able to do that? So just kind of have to wait and see. But I think it's really important to speak about these things because stigma's a bitch. And no one really knows what ADHD is. It's not just bouncing off the walls. It can be, but not always. I was never the kid in school who didn't do the work and was like, you know, bouncing off the walls or talking to everyone or running around. I was the kid who took extra time on my exam because I couldn't focus on what I was doing. I would zone out when the teacher was talking, so I would have no clue how to do the assignment. Things like that. So yeah, I just want to talk about my experience, and my experience can be so different from someone else's. So this is just me. I'm not giving you therapy. I'm not a doctor. I'm just giving you my personal experience. So maybe you can learn. You can talk to your doctor. Talk to me. And yeah, as I said, I have a few more diagnoses, which it took me, I mean, obviously it's been months, so it's taken me a little while to kind of digest my diagnoses and come to terms with it and just learn more about them. Like with ADHD, it's taken me a long time to learn all about this. So thank you for listening to me. As I said, I will be discussing the other diagnoses soon. It's just about how I feel, right? I don't want to push myself to or be too vulnerable just for the sake of education or people liking me on social media. That's a whole nother problem I have that I'll get to another time. I think I'm just really sick of dealing with all of this by myself, and I feel like if I can open it up, whether it's like on Instagram or whatever, then it's kind of like it's lifted off of my chest a little bit, and I'm not just holding on to all of it alone. It allows me just to be who I am and not have to hide the fact that I can't freaking focus sometimes, or that I'm on medication. Because I know I'm not alone. I'm not the only person in the world who's dealing with their mental health shit. Definitely not alone. So, again, muchas gracias. Gracias. And we'll do this again soon. Okay, bye.